Thank you for coming on this wonderful, typical Vancouver day. I was hoping for sunshine, but obviously it didn't happen. But that's okay, because you're all here. I would like to introduce James Johnston, who's going to be the MC for this event. He's a local historian, and he's a Strathcona resident. Here you go, James Johnston.
Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, welcome to Strathcona. Welcome back to the East End, Vancouver's oldest neighborhood. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that before there was a Strathcona, before there was an East End, and before there was a Vancouver, that the land we stand on was and is unceded Coast Salish territory. I'm deeply honored to be your MC this afternoon. Today we gather to honor the memory of the SPOTA pioneers who are not only Strathcona neighborhood heroes, but in fact Canadian national heroes. It was through the leadership of these East Enders who banded together to form the Strathcona Property and Tenants Association, and through their tenacious efforts that not only was our East End neighborhood saved from the bulldozers, but they also pioneered the way in which Vancouver and cities across Canada changed the way they engage citizens and neighborhoods in the process of city and social planning. Through their efforts, Strathcona became the first of Canada's little neighborhoods that could fight and win against City Hall, and even work with them. On that note, I would like to acknowledge a number of special guests from the city and beyond. Deputy Mayor Kerry Jang, Councillor Adrienne Carr, Councillor Raymond Louie, Councillor Jeff Meggs, Councillor Tony Tang, former City Councillor and SPOTA supporter May Brown, former City Councillor and SPOTA supporter Marguerite Ford, former City Councillor George Chow, our MP for Vancouver East, Libby Davies, Diane Spearing, wife of SPOTA supporter David Spearing, and authors and editors Carol Idder and Daphne Marlett, who wrote the Opening Doors book, as well as Susie Ng, formerly Susie Jung. Thank you, so welcome. I'm going to throw all these down, I don't need you. Okay. So some background. What was SPOTA? Well, first of all, this East End neighborhood was rezoned six-story industrial in 1931 as a result of the Bartholomew Plan, and from that moment on, this neighborhood went through a period of forced deterioration. Lots of changes, of course. We have a very rich history, various waves of different cultural groups coming into the neighborhood, but 1947 was an important year for this neighborhood. That was the year that the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed, and the beginning of the reunification of Chinese-Canadian families, many of whom moved into this neighborhood, some as a result of the vacation of houses through the deportation of the Japanese prior to World War II. But anyway, by 1958, half of this neighborhood was populated by people of Chinese heritage. Around 1950, the Marsh Study proposes slum clearance and massive medium to high-rise redevelopment of the residential part of the East End. Not knowing this plan has been proposed, Walter and Mary Lee Chan buy this house, 658 Kiefer, in 1953 or 54. By 1958, three levels of government combined to acquire blocks of houses, bulldoze them, and erect public housing projects. Despite protests from Chinese property owners led by Fun Sin, Phase 1 of the city's Strathcona redevelopment plan begins in 1960, bulldozing 30 acres to build the McLean Park and Raycam public housing projects. An estimated 860 people, excluding boarders and transients, were displaced, and over half of this number were of Chinese-Canadian heritage. Many of the people who actually moved into these new housing projects were not from this community. In 1963, despite the rejection of two city plans by the local community, Phase 2 of the Strathcona redevelopment project proceeds with work on the blocks bounded by Kiefer, Jackson, Georgia, and Dunleavy Street. I saw it on TV. In 1968, Phase 3 of Strathcona redevelopment project prompts Mary Lee Chan, who was then holding down 3 jobs, to to start a door-to-door campaign to involve and organize neighbors to fight the redevelopment plan. Bessie Lee and the people whose names are on this MOSAIC behind me joined this effort. In November of 1968, 600 neighbors met at the Gibbs Boy Club, the old Jewish synagogue there at Heatley and Pender, and they formed the Strathcona Property Owners and Tenants Association. SPOTA organized fundraising events and lobbied local politicians, asking them to stop the redevelopment scheme and focus on rehabilitation of our old housing stock instead of knocking it down. SPOTA got the ear and then the support of Paul Hellyer, who was the Federal Minister of Housing. Hellyer announced a freeze of federal funds for urban renewal, and the destruction of Strathcona was stopped. There's so much more to this story, but it's summed up very neatly by Shirley Chan, the daughter of Mary Lee Chan, is that citizens' voices are heard today the way they weren't in the past. I would like to call Shirley Chan to the stage.